Hello everyone, XV here from youtube.com/XVRogueGaming, and this is the 10th video in a weekly series I'm doing for Dotacinema designed to take your game to the next level. Last week we talked about the Radiant Ward, so this week it's all about Dire. Next week we'll be talking about counter warding and neutral camp blocking, as well as the when and whys of both. Like last week, I split this video up into the early, mid, and late game, as well as offensive and defensive. Though I'll be going over some in detail, make sure to note where I stand when I place the wards, as it's very deliberate. So let's get started on the comprehensive guide for the Dire. As before, the wards we place should have a specific offensive or defensive purpose. From a defensive perspective, we want knowledge of the runes and vision of places where we can be backstabbed. So let's go through the ward spots, starting with the top lane. Like the Radiant, we can place a ward here just below the tree. Cutting down these two trees as before really opens up the vision. I find that this ward is overly defensive, however, and prefer to instead place one here. This placement allows you to see deep into the lane, especially since most of the fighting takes place at the elbow. While this ward does block a creep camp, I find it to be very much a Dire defensive ward early game, so I've included it. Placed here, it provides you with ample vision behind the tree line and stops the large camp from respawning and thus pulled by the Radiant more than once. If you're shocked that this camp can be pulled, check out episode 1 on the Dotacinema page for pulling, where I detail all of the timings. I'm not really a fan of this ward, but it's put down a lot. It's a bit blind without landscaping and generally needs to be used in conjunction with another to be effective. Overall, it's an option, but I feel that any of the others are better. Next up, we see the same rune watching ward. Notice that I place it from the neutral camp though. I see a lot of Dire heroes run into the river to put this one down, and you're really asking to die. What we saw used as an offensive Radiant ward can be put down as a defensive Dire ward if you're middle and scared of straying too far from a tower. This is a very ineffective ward, and I only mention it as it is an option. Particularly fragile heroes will also want to consider putting a ward here. It's a common spot for pudge hooks and similar ganking heroes who want to wrap behind your tier 1. On the bottom lane, here is a good spot, especially since it can be placed from the Ancients, but it's not the greatest unless the enemy team is a hero that can go for an early Roshan. Instead, I prefer this ward, which can be placed from the river if you're solo, or from a distance on the high ground if you have a teammate you can rely on. Offensively in the early game, there's really only two options. The Radiant Ancient gives you ample vision of the high ground and the path their middle hero will take, as well as maintaining vision of the rune. This ward is difficult to place, however, as it expects you to go up 2 blind ramps and is generally only something I'd advise if you've just killed the middle hero or are returning from top. There's a sub-element as well about avoiding being seen, but we will discuss that in detail next week when we focus on counter warding. This ward is really more of a ganking ward for mid-game, as it doesn't provide much more vision than the Ancient ward at the loss of seeing the rune. In specific and rare cases, some players like to put a ward here. This provides you with good vision of the middle, but doesn't let you see either rune, and is really a very specialized option for middle pudge players or very aggressive gankers. Again, assuming the mid-game is when the first tier of towers are destroyed, the defensive wards for the Dire pull back primarily into the jungle. Farming past the bend in the top lane requires a ward at the ramp entrance of the jungle. That said, knowing which route the Radiant are taking once in your jungle is also very important. Thus, placing a ward here will let you see which way they're going once they've crossed the river and can be very useful for either escaping or setting up your own counter ganks. At the bottom lane, it's a lot more difficult because of these trees. Placing a ward on the high ground, especially if you can Quelling Blade down these trees, is the best way to spot any kind of wraparound or Radiant grouping. Offensively, we see a mirror of the Radiant's mid-game wards with some minor adjustments. Top to bottom, I try to make sure I have a ward here once the tier 1 goes down. This lets you see well into the woods as well as deep up the lane and behind, giving you a lot of notice that you're being pincered. Here at the ramp is almost necessary if you want to safely take the tier 2 middle, and I highly recommend it if you're pushing without 2 to 3 of the enemy team down. The high ground bridge here is another good spot. Generally I only use this one though if the Radiant are being very active with wards, as the moment I see a support roaming through this path I know what they're up to. I stand behind these trees to plant it to remain out of sight as best I can. By far the best mid-game offensive dire ward is here. This tracks any and all movement through the jungle. Once towers go down, many hard carries will rotate between the lane and the woods for farming, and thus shutting them down is made infinitely easier. Notice how I stand tucked into the trees to place it. Any smart player who sees you plant this ward will immediately counter it for the safety of their farming, so it's in your best interest to be a bit sneaky. Lastly, in the center of the lane is a solid spot to maintain vision, especially at night. The first thing you're going to want is to control the pillar, regardless of if your tier 2 tower is still up or not. This is the most common place for enemy heroes to group up at this stage in the game, and you need to know about it. This, coupled with replacing any fallen towers, is pretty much all you need to worry about. Sometimes I'll plant a ward here, or here, but as dire, the lay of the land works out a little bit differently than the Radiant. Offensively, I love this ward. It gives great vision around the bend when you're taking the tier 2 tower, and consistent vision to avoid backstabs when you're pushing in for the tier 3. The high ground pillar here is also really important. Note that I approach it from the north and that I place my ward to the northeast corner. This is because the Radiant will approach it from the southwest, and even if they put down a sentry, or worse for them, use dust, they will be out of range to destroy the ward unless they wrap around into a very easy to gank position, after you've had a lot of warning. Another shared spot is here, but I place it from behind the tree line and will put it down even if the tier 2 tower is up to make pushing it safe. Like the Radiant, getting wards into the high ground of the base should be done the moment you take any towers, and you can even place wards by moving flush with the side of their base provided they don't have heroes such as Pudge or Vengeful Spirit to punish you for it. I omitted several spots that I either consider a waste to place a ward at, or because they're designed to block a camp, which either faction may want to do depending on the situation. Remember that it's you who decide the topic, so be sure to post in the comments below what you'd like to see and subscribe to my channel to be eligible to win chest keys. As always though, if you like this video, please thumbs up, share, and check out my channel for more in-depth guides and exclusive content and contests. Next week, efficiently blocking neutrals and counter warding. Until then, this is XV, signing out.